Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. All right, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest wishes to keep his identity anonymous. With that in mind, we're just going to call him Brad and digitally alter his voice. Brad was featured on episode 268, and on that show he told us about a Dogman encounter he had in California. Well, since that show aired, he had a much more intense encounter, and that's what he's come back to tell us about tonight. Brad, thanks so much for coming back on to update us.
Thanks for having me, Vic.
Oh, thanks so much for coming back on. We appreciate it. Brad, for the listeners who missed episode 268, please tell them about yourself.
I just recently turned 51 years old. I'm born and raised Southern California. Have 2 daughters, both grown. Just completed a finance degree, which was my second bachelor's degree. I was working on that when we did the first episode together, and then I just recently finished about a month ago on my birthday, actually. Finished my last class, and so now I have that, and I'm going to be moving to Oklahoma from Southern California to help my mom out with my stepfather, and who's not doing so well. Divorced, been a adrenaline junkie my whole life. When I was younger, I was a surfer, big wave surfer. Jumped out of planes, been a bungee jumper, got into a lot of fights. I've always liked, adrenaline and doing things that I probably shouldn't do, just pushing the envelope. I've noticed that I've had to kind of curtail that, obviously, as I've gotten older. But, other than that, I am a finance guy and planning on getting back into that now that I am done with school. Not sure how that's going to go in Oklahoma, but that's the plan right now. As soon as I can leave Southern California, I'm ready to leave California, which I never thought I'd say because I love California, but it's time to go for me. I think other than that, about myself, I'm a fairly good sized guy. I'm 6'3", about 230. Guess that's about it. I'm a big time gun guy. That's one of my hobbies. Is one of the reasons why I'm going to leave California is because it's not really a gun friendly state. So I'm going to leave Southern California and go to a place where it's a little more friendly towards gun owners.
It sounds like your life is about to change quite a bit. I just hope it changes for the better. And by the way, I'm so sorry to hear about your stepdad. Yeah, that's rough.
Well, he's going to be 86 here in a few days. So, I mean, he's got all kinds of problems, and one of those situations where it's almost, I hate to say it, but you kind of hope that he passes just because of what he's having to go through. And it's hard on my mom. She's quite a bit younger than him, and, it's one of those things, she needs my help. And so it worked out good for me because I'm divorced now. My kids are grown, and I've got a chance with the money that I'm going to get from selling this place that I live in now, that I can go out there and live for a while and help my mom in his last months. And that's what I'm going to do. She's always been there for me, so I'm going to be there for her.
Well, that's awfully admirable that you're going to take care of her that way. I'm impressed. You came back to do tonight's show because you went out trying to hunt a dogman. What in the world was your motivation for doing that?
How it started was, I'm going to just, go all the way back to the beginning. When I first came across Uncle Vic Cundiff and Dogman Encounters, probably close to 2 years ago, I thought it was strictly a entertainment site. I listened to some of your stuff, and I thought, no, there's no way, this is actually real. But the more I listened, the more I began to realize that these creatures are real, right? And I thought, wow, I mean, you think of werewolves and, Bigfoot and all those types of things, but I think I started listening to you in like either January or February of 2019. And then somehow, some way, I had my own encounter in June of last year, which we documented in the first interview. But then I realized that these creatures are real. I mean, I didn't have a violent encounter my first time. In fact, it was as pleasant as it could be as far as, when you're dealing with a dogman, right? But how this all started was this second encounter was after you and I got done and it aired in, I believe it was early September of last year. I didn't listen to the recording. Don't ask me why. I got busy with school, I think, and I think there was a girl in there somewhere too. But anyway, or a woman, I should say. And I just didn't listen to the recording that you and I did until like early December of last year. And the only reason I even remembered it was I was on YouTube looking for something else, financial stuff. And then I remember I saw a Dogman thing pop up and I said, oh, I never did listen to the interview that I did with Uncle Vic. So I went on and I listened to it and I sounded okay, I thought, at least compared to other folks that I've heard, let's just say that. But I started, as I was listening to it, I started reading the comments that people were making about me and my encounter. And I have to say 90% of them were very positive, very nice to me. Hey, this guy sounds really normal. This guy's, you could tell this guy's telling the truth and all this other stuff. But then there was about 10% maybe that were like, this guy's an idiot thinking that because I had mentioned in that video or that, not the video, the first interview that we did that I thought it was possible to take one down. And, there were some people that said, this guy's an idiot for thinking he could kill one of these things. These things are supernatural beings, which is not true. And that kind of irritated me, only because I'm one of those people that when you tell me I can't do something, I want to do it. And especially it irritates me when it's somebody that doesn't know me and what I'm capable of. I'm not saying I'm the greatest guy in the world or anything, but, usually when I put my mind to something, I can do it. And so it kind of stuck in my craw a little bit. These people had said that, but by and large, most people were very nice, very sweet, saying nice things about me. But I remember the ones, you always remember the bad stuff, right? So I put it in the back of my mind. And then my mom called me about, I don't know, a few days after that and said, hey, you want to come out for Christmas to Oklahoma? So I said, yeah, all right. It's a 21-hour drive from where I live, but I said, fine, I'll come out. So I went out there and I spent a couple of weeks with my mom for Christmas. And here's where really the story begins. When I got out there, my parents, my mom and my stepfather, they own probably, 13 or 14 rental properties in Oklahoma. And their handyman, the guy that they keep on payroll that does all types of different jobs, is a former Marine. I think he was actually now that I think about it, I can't remember if he said it was Afghanistan or Iraq, but obviously it was one of the two. But he right about 2 days before I left to come home, he came over to pick up a check from my mom for some work that he had done on one of their properties. And he's probably 11 or 12 years younger than me. And he had been in the Corps from 03 to 011. And so combat, got a medal. I think it was a Bronze Star, but don't quote me on that. He said it was the least of the Valor medals. And then he got a Purple Heart. He got wounded. I think he said it was in his buttocks. That's kind of funny. He got shot in the butt. But anyway, he and I started talking. We were in the garage, my mom's garage, and we were talking. And I happened to bring up, because it was still on my mind, that there had been I started talking about the Dogman sighting that I had happened to me. And then I mentioned that one of the places where it's like red hot with Dogman Encounters is in Oklahoma, the Ouachita Mountains. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you serious?" And I thought he was saying that like I was a kook, like he was gonna like mock me for saying Dogman. And so I said yes, and he's like, "I saw one." And then, of course, that got my attention. And I said, you saw a dogman? And he said, well, yeah, a canine on two legs. Is that what you're talking about? And I said, yeah. And so we started talking. One thing led to another. And I said, could you get back to where it was that you saw this? And he said, yeah, I go hunting there sometimes. And I said, well, when did you see this? And what was interesting is that he said it was in June of 2019. Now, of course, it wasn't the same dogman because I was in California and he was in Oklahoma, but I thought it was kind of funny that he saw his first experience in June of 2019, just like mine. And I said, well, how'd you see him? And he's like, well, I was looking through a rifle scope from probably 700-800 yards away. And I said, well, then how did you know it was a dogman? He's like, well, it was on all fours and then it stood up and started walking. And I was like, oh, that would be a good indication. So right at that moment, it occurred to me, I was like, well, what do you think about like trying to like bring one of these down? And he said, well, you mean like kill one? And I said, yeah, because everybody denies their existence. Obviously, you and I now know they exist. Other people exist. I told him about Dogman Encounters, which he didn't know about. And he said, he goes, oh, it could be done. And I'm like, yeah, I think it could be done too, but you'd have to have a plan because these are really intelligent apex predators. And so, I said, well, I'll tell you what, let me think about it. And because I have another buddy that I think I mentioned in the first interview named Don, who's a match shooter. He's won several shooting competitions with his caliber of choice, which is a 30-06 bolt-action rifle. So I said, let me go talk to him, and I said, I'll get back to you. And mind you, this is all transpiring in December of 2019. So I left Oakland. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll be back in touch with you. And we exchanged phone numbers, and really cool guy. At the time anyway, I thought he was a really cool guy. Bigger guy, about 6'2", maybe 210. Looks like a guy you wouldn't want to mess with, but people say that about me too. So anyway, so I drove home and I got home. And then after the first of the year, I called my buddy John, who is a real estate appraiser, and he used to work for me. That's how I met him. I actually am the one who got him into guns originally, although he went in a different direction. I'm a handgun guy. He got into shooting long distance and sniper type competitions. And I called him up and I told him what I wanted to do. And of course, he's like, I told him, hey, you think you could be convinced to go hunting with me? And of course, he was like, sure, what are we talking about? And I was kind of hesitant because I know he's a lot like me. He doesn't believe a lot of BS from people. And so I decided that I would just come clean and tell him what happened. And at first he kind of laughed at me and he's like, are you serious? And I said, yeah. And I told him about Mark. Mark is the Marine that I was telling you. That's their real first names, John and Mark. And I told him that I had met him and that, when we had the time. And then, of course, John said, well, when do you want to go do this? And I said, well, I'm not sure. So I had to put things on the back burner because I was right in the middle of school and I didn't have any time to go back, to Oklahoma. So I put it on the back burner. But then in July, I got to kind of move forward now about 7 months. I found out that I was going to get a week off in between my second to last term and my last term for my degree. I was going to have 8 days off. So I thought that'd be a perfect time to go because it was late August, still hot, still seeing daylight much later than, if you wait a few months. So I called up John and I said, hey, I'm going to have some time. This is probably early July. I think this happened. I said, I'm going to have some time in August. Do you want to come with me? And he kind of chuckled and he said, what, you mean to hunt a dogman? I said, yeah. I said, I'm going to go ahead and buy us some camouflage gear. I ended up buying some, what the U.S. Marines used to use. I think it's called woodland camo. So I told him, he gave me the sizes and I bought us each a couple of pairs, a couple of shirts, and I bought some other stuff. I bought a cross-draw vest so I could carry my ammo, and Mark already had all his own stuff being an ex-Marine, and so we had a conversation, and John and I got into a little bit of an argument because he's rated, whatever that means, to about 1,400 yards with a 30-06, which is, you're talking, what's that, three quarters of a mile, maybe a little bit more. I mean, this guy's a serious competition shooter, right? But I told him that, he's still, got to understand, he's still not believing. And I don't blame him, honestly. He's like, this is all a fairy tale. We're just going to go out and play Army Man. So what difference does it make? And I said, look, do you have another gun that's more powerful than a 30-06? And he said, well, I've got a Ruger 77, which is a 3+1 or 16 Rigby. And I know enough about rifles to know that is an incredibly powerful round. I mean, it's the exit wound. If it goes straight through, it'll be 4 to 5 inches. I mean, it's a serious round. But he kind of didn't understand why, even if I was telling the truth about the Dogman. He said, look, a 30-06 to the head will do the job. And I said, it might. It very well might do the job, but what if you don't hit it in the head? And, I said, I can tell you all the stories that I've heard that 308, 30-06, yeah, it wounds them, but it doesn't stop them. And I said, we're not going to get a lot of opportunity, if we even are fortunate enough to find one of these creatures. We're going to need something where the round will do the job, because these are dangerous creatures. And he was like, Brad, a 30-06 can take a grizzly out from, 1,000 yards. And I said, yeah, I understand that, but that's with a headshot. And I said, if we don't get the headshot, we need something that will do massive damage. Now, it turned out I ended up being right on this, right? So we went back and forth. We even got into a little argument, but finally I convinced him, and he's like, well, I'm going to have to transfer my scope to the Ruger. And I said, well, do whatever you need to do. We got plenty of time. So he did. He even went and practiced a couple of times. And so then we had another conversation, and I said, so how far, I need to know this, how far are you very confident with this 416 Rigby? And he goes, well, Brad, he says, I could probably hit it maybe 550, 600, no more than 700 yards with this. I said, okay, that's still good enough. He says, I think this is overkill. And I said, okay, well, just humor me. We probably won't find anything anyway. So he decided that he was going to take the 416 Rigby with him. He did. And so then when the end of August came, we left on Sunday, August 24th, and we made the 21-hour drive. I drove most of it. He drove maybe 5 hours of that. And we got to my mother's house Monday morning on the 25th. And then we slept most of that day. And then we had made up our mind that we were going to go to the site where Mark knew on Tuesday. And we were going to spend 3 nights, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, and then come home Friday, like a little camping trip, so to speak. And I'm not much of a camper. I am a hiker, but I think I've only been camping maybe 5 or 6 times in my life. I'm not a hunter either. So we make the drive out there, and I tell Mark to come over. So that Monday night, I said, why don't you come over so we can game plan what we're going to do, right? So Mark came over, I introduced him to John, my mom, and we, over some beers, we were sitting in the garage, and we started talking about what we were going to do. And then John realized that Mark had seen the creature too. And so he started to believe a little bit more, I think, when he heard, a former Marine saying, I saw this creature, they exist. So we decided that we would go and spend, like I said earlier, we would spend 3 nights there, but we would break it down into quadrants from wherever we were going to be camped at, which I'll get to in a minute. But I got to step back here for a second. So this is where the people need to know what type of armaments we were carrying. So I only own a couple of rifles. All of my collection is handguns because that's what I feel comfortable with. But I do own a Springfield Armory Scout Squad, which is a 308. It's a battle rifle. And I had 10 20-round clips. Mark has an AR-10, which is basically just an AR-15. It's on that platform, but it also shoots a 308. He also had 10 20-round clips or magazines as well. I went a little overboard on the handguns. On my right thigh, I was carrying a Springfield Armory XD-10, which is a 10 millimeter. I thought that was to me, I didn't want to bring a revolver because if we got into a situation where we actually found one of these creatures, I thought it would be best to have semi-automatic because we might need to shoot, more than 6-7 rounds. So on my thigh rig, I had the Springfield XD10, which has a 15-round mag, has several extra mags. In my cross draw, I was carrying my Glock 20, also with several 15-round extra mags. And then on my left, and I had the holster reversed, I was carrying a Kimber 1911, also in 10 millimeter with an 8-round mag. So I had several extra mags of that. On top of that, in an ankle holster, I was carrying a 357 with a 2.5-inch barrel, 66 plus, which carries 7 rounds. I'm telling you all of this and being so specific about the gun so that you guys can understand the magnitude of how well we were armored up. Brad was carrying, as I said earlier, the AR-10, and he was also carrying a pistol grip shotgun in a sling on his back with extra ammunition, and then 2 matching 1911s and 45 ACP. And then our distance guy, John, was carrying his Ruger 77 in a 416 Rigby, again, which is a massive round. And then he had a 5-inch Smith & Wesson Model 29 on his thigh, which is 44 mag. Then he had a 4-inch on his left side in 44 mag. It's the same Model 29, but in 4-inch instead of 5-inch. So we had a total of 12 guns between the 3 of us. So we were heavily armed. We had discussed how much weight I was going to be carrying because I'm the oldest of the 3 on this little team that we put together. John is maybe 5 or 6 years younger than me, and Mark is probably 12 years younger than me, maybe even a little more. So we decided, okay, well, these are the guns we were going to have. We loaded up all the magazines, got all of our gear together, put all kinds of extra water, and then Mark has a old style van. It is like I think it's from the early 80s, but it was one of those vans where the only way in is in the back and there's windows on the back. And that was good because we really didn't want anybody to see, the type of armory. Not that anything was illegal, but, you're going to get questioned if you get pulled over when you got that amount of firepower with you, right? So we decided that we would take the van, and it was about a 2 to 2.5 hour drive from my mom's house to where he wanted to go. So when we're discussing this is where it gets a little grisly for the kiddies that are listening. When we were discussing this, Mark said, how are we going to, he goes, I don't think we're going to see any of these things. And John echoed the same opinion, right? But he goes, just in case we do, how are we going to get the body to the van? And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So it occurred to me, well, I was looking at my pop's tool. He's got like a big workstation, and on the workstation, I saw this Black & Decker. It was a 16-inch handsaw. And so I just thought to myself, how about this? And so I said, why don't we do this? I'll take a saw with me in a backpack with maybe 10 to 12 feet of painter's plastic, some duct tape, and then another sharp knife if I need it. I'll keep it in the backpack. And if we were able to kill one of these things, I'll cut the head off and one of the hands, because that's what makes these things so different is their hands rather than, their back paws. And so we all kind of looked at each other, and they're like, that's actually not a bad idea. And I said, I think I can manage to carry the head, even though I know how big these heads are. I think I can carry the head and a hand. At least we'll be able to prove that what we killed wasn't a wolf or a dog or some sort of other unknown animal. And so we all agreed that that's what we would do, but that was even more weight than I was going to be carrying, right? I mean, I was being overly optimistic about the type of shape I was in, and I thought, don't worry about it. I can carry it home. And Mark's like, I've been a soldier. I can tell you, you're going to be carrying way too much weight in all of the ammunition and stuff. And I was like, I got it, no problem. I mean, it turns out he was right, but so we were going to spend 3 nights there. We were going to break out where we were walking into quadrants, which I'll go into in a second. And so I said to Mark, well, what time do you want to leave in the morning? And he said, well, he's kind of a camper, outdoorsy type guy. So I let him lead in that area. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we leave about 6 o'clock in the morning? And I said, okay, that's fine. That way John and I will get up at 5, get showered and everything, because I knew we weren't going to be able to shower. And I need to point that out is that I'm a very much clean, neat freak, and the idea of not showering for 4 days was bothering me even before we left. But next morning it rolls around and 6 o'clock comes and he pulls up in the van. We load up all of our gear, all these, we had 2 cases of Aquafina water. We had beef jerky, processed cheese, granola bars. Didn't really pack, like, looking back on it, I guess we should have. We didn't really pack anything for, like, real meals, right? We just packed, like, stuff that you eat to stay full. And they packed a little bit of beer as well. I'm not much of a drinker, but in fact, I think I only drank one night while we were there. But anyway, we loaded the entire truck. We loaded up all of our guns, our ammunition, everything, all of our equipment. So we left at about, on that Tuesday, which would have been the August 26th, we left about 6:30, I would say, in the morning, and got to the site. Now, for the people who live in this area, I'm not from Oklahoma, so I'm gonna try to tell you where this is, so that you can either avoid this area, or if you're brazen and you want to see one or try to bring one down, then you know what area that this is. But you go all the way down the 59 off the 40. It turns into the 259, and you go through 2 national forests, so to speak. The first one is like where there's an Indian reservation, and then if you continue on another hour or so, you come to what's called the Ouachita National Forest. And if you look on a map, anybody who's listening, you'll see where I'm talking about. So where we were headed was the very southern eastern corner of Oklahoma, because most of the Ouachita National Forest is the state of Arkansas. But we were on the Oklahoma side in a little pocket on the west side of the 259. I think I told you in the pre-interview that it was 241, but it was 259. So we drove 2 to 2.5 hours. We got there. We got off the freeway. We made a couple of rights. And then he started taking us up into the hills. And I said, are we going to a place where there's a lot of people? And he said, oh, no. We're going to a place we probably won't run into anybody. Or if we do, it'll just be like a hunter type thing. And I said, okay, good, because I was a little concerned because I knew what we were going to look like. We did not look like hunters, right? I mean, well, I guess you could say John did because he had a bolt action rifle, but Mark and I look like combat soldiers, which I thought was appropriate considering what we were there to do. But so as we were getting out, I was starting to feel real confident when we were doing the camp, and they told me that they wanted to sleep in a tent. And I said, you guys are absolutely out of your mind. I'm going to sleep in the van because I know what we're here for. And if these things are close, I'm not sleeping in a tent. They thought I was a sissy. That's not the word they used, but for the families listening, they called me a sissy. And I said, you can call me whatever you want, but, I'm sleeping in the van. Fortunately for us, when we pulled off, we were on this road where when we pulled off, we were only maybe 6-7 feet from the actual, it's a 1-lane road on one side, or a one-way on one side of the road, and then a one-way on the other. People who hunt there will know where I'm talking about, but later on it would come to find out it was a dead end. If you drive about another mile past where we were, maybe a mile and a half, there's a yellow sign there. It's like it just says dead end. So we got there about, I guess it was maybe 9 o'clock, 9:30, somewhere in there. We set up camp, and I was asking them, I'm like, are we just going to leave our camp stuff here, or shouldn't we, like, each night when we're done, shouldn't we, like, put it in the van and lock it? And Mark, he's like, no, man, the only people who'll see it are hunters, and they're not going to steal. I was like, wow, this is totally different than Southern California, because you could never do that where I'm from. But so anyway, we get there, and while we're sitting there, we were drinking some coffee, and we were kind of we're getting all geared up, right? And of course, I started realizing how much weight I was carrying, because, I got all those guns, all the ammunition, I've got binoculars on, I got a pedometer on, so I know how much we were walking, canteen, I got a big Bowie knife, plus what I was carrying in the backpack. Just really a lot of equipment. We are all carrying a lot of equipment, but me more than the other two. So when we were drinking coffee, I said, so how are we going to do this? What do you we were kind of bouncing ideas off of how we were going to, go about looking for this creature. So I said, why don't we break it into quadrants, meaning, since we're going to be here 4 days, why don't we break it into, we'll go out into a certain direction one way, come right and walk it out, and then come back and then do that in each of the quadrants that we had broken this up from. And they thought that was a pretty good idea. Now, I had said, why don't we go 10 miles out and then 10 miles back for a total of 20 miles? And Mark laughed at me and he said, there's no possible way you're going to be able to do 4 days of walking 80 miles with all of that equipment on. And I kind of argued with him a little bit, but he was right. And so finally we agreed that we would walk out 5 miles. I keep track of it on my pedometer, right? We would walk out 5 miles and then walk back. So we only walked a total of 10 miles. And Mark had a map. So, he's showing us where we were at. And I said, okay, so then we'll do Tuesday. We'll go 5 miles straight out this way, which is like to our left, right? And then Wednesday, we'll go left center, 5 miles out, 5 miles back. Thursday, right center, 5 miles out, 5 miles back. And then Friday, our last day, all the way to the right, we'll go 5 miles out and 5 miles back. Man, they agreed, and it was already getting really hot. You got to remember, it was the end of August in Oklahoma, so it was way hotter than what even though I knew it was going to be hot, I didn't realize how hot it was going to be. So we decided that we were not going to hunt at night in any way, shape, or form, even though Mark did have those binoculars that you have where you can see at night. We decided that, these creatures already had a big enough advantage, so we were not going to hunt at night. So we decided we would leave every day at 11 or so and be back by 5. And they thought that was good because that way there were still 2.5 hours of sunlight, and we could have dinner or eat or whatever. So, okay, that's what we'll do. Okay, so Tuesday, the first day rolls around. We've had a bunch of coffee. We're all jacked up. Mark was drinking those 5-hour energies. I think he had like 2 of them before we left. But we decided that we would, we mapped out where we were going to walk. And so we started out. And I'm telling you, like 30 minutes into it, I'm beginning to realize, like, oh my God, I'm carrying way too much weight. But, at that point, I couldn't be a sissy and then admit that they're right. It's a pride thing. So I just grinned and bare it. So the first weird thing that happened was we were walking down this trail. I can only describe it. And again, for those of you who are hunters, forgive me, I'm not a hunter. So I'm going to try to describe this as best I can. I am a hiker, but I'm not a hunter. So, I don't know a lot of the lingo, but I'm assuming this little path we were on was some sort of an animal trail. And it was right up against, I should say the topography of this where we were there was some forest, also rolling hills, big rocks, little valleys, little grassy knolls, bluffs. I think those are the right words. But we happened to be walking down this trail that was right up against to our right as we were walking this hill where there was nowhere to go on the right. And then to our left was like about 4 feet and then an embankment going down into like a forest. So we were kind of on like this pathway that was on a ridge. So I'd say we were probably getting close to the turnaround point when I was walking in the back, Mark was in the middle, and John was in the front. We didn't have our guns drawn or anything. We were just carrying them. And here comes this old man that I don't know how else to explain it other than he looked like a fisherman out of Mayberry. He looked like Opie, how many times I got to tell you out of my fishing wire? That's the thing. I mean, this guy looked like he was from Mayberry from 1955. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. His clothes were old. His shoes were out of date. He was wearing one of those fishing hats that are like circular, that fishermen like put their lures in. I think that's what they call them. I mean, this guy looked, and he had like a basket on his right side. He looked like he was out of 1955. I've never seen a modern fisherman look like this. I'm not a fisherman guy, but I know what they look like, right? And he didn't look like that. He did not say, as he was walking towards us, the first time I noticed there was somebody our presence was when I saw John and then Mark move out of the way because he was coming the opposite way, right at us. He didn't say anything. He didn't say, excuse me. John stepped out of the way, then Mark stepped out of the way, and then I wasn't aware that he was there until he was only like 4 feet from me. And then I said, oh, excuse me. And I stepped to the left, and he nodded at me, and I nodded at him, and he kept going. Like 15 seconds later, no more than 20 seconds later, I looked back. We kept walking, and I looked back, and he was gone. And I mean gone. And there was no way that he could have started running straight and got out of our view. So the only, what did Arthur Conan Doyle say? When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. He either he dove down the embankment to his right, or he just disappeared. There's no other explanation. And if he did dive down the embankment, I don't know why he would have done that. This was an older man, probably in his early 60s. That was probably the strangest thing that happened to us. And then when I noticed that he was gone, I said to Mark and John, I said, where'd he go? And they like looked back real quick. He was gone. And I said, where did he go? So that was strange. So we keep walking, and we're just about to get to where we were at 5 miles, and we were going to turn around. So we stopped, right? I was drinking some water. And then John said, let's keep going a little further. We're not quite at 5 miles yet. So we started walking again. And right as we started walking after our little break, here comes this other guy. Now, this was a hunter, clearly, because he was carrying a rifle. And he was dressed modern. He was actually a real hunter, I think. But he gave us the strangest look. And when he saw John, John was in camos, but he had a hunting rifle, right? And a revolver on his side. So he still kind of looked like a hunter. But Mark and I looked like combat soldiers. So when he walked by, he was kind of giving us this like suspicious look. And he's like, what are you guys doing here? And Mark said, oh, we're hunting bears. And the hunter goes, well, there's no like grizzly or anything like that here. And Mark kind of sarcastically said, big black bears, big black bears. And I think that's how it went. But he kind of looked up and down. I'm sure he was looking at me in particular, all the guns I had on me, right? And he's like, wow, okay. And after he's like, well, good luck. And he kind of kept looking back at us. So I said to Mark, I said, is he going to go like tell some ranger or something that there's some kooks out here with a bunch of guns or something? And he's like, no, man, he's a hunter. Don't worry about it. But when I looked back, he was looking at us. And he looked us, me and Mark especially, he looked up and down. And, not many hunters are carrying 2 pistols, a shotgun, and the other one got 4 handguns with him, plus a combat rifle. So I'm sure we looked kind of strange to him. But he kept walking. He's like, well, good luck. And so we said, okay, have a good day. And we kept walking, and he kept walking. He didn't disappear, though. He just kept walking. So we got to the 5 mile point. We turned around and we came back and, got to our camp and everything was fine with nobody. We were only like maybe 100 yards from the van, which was really nice. So we made dinner, or we made, whatever we ate. I had a American soup and a beef jerky or a Slim Jim, something like that. We ate that, and they ate, and we drank. They had some beers and maybe some coffee. And then Tuesday came around. We did the same thing in the left center quadrant, walked out 5 miles, came back. We saw some small animals, saw some raccoons. John thought he saw a cougar or a mountain lion of some sort. I didn't see it, but that's what he said. Didn't really see any like big creatures. In fact, it was really pleasant while we were out there. Very pleasant, nice day, sun was out. My face was starting to get burned. So Tuesday ends, we come back and do the same thing. I'm sleeping in the van still. They're sleeping in the tent. Thursday rolls around, go out into our right center quadrant. We walk out 5 miles, come back. Same thing. I think Mark got a little hammered that night. I think at that point we all had thought, at least we got outdoors and had a camping trip and had some camaraderie and play Army Man for a few days, right? Because we hadn't seen anything, right? And so I asked Mark, I said, where exactly did you see, where, he's like, well, I just know I was in this area. I can't tell you the exact spot. So Friday comes around and we wake up early Friday morning. I drank a lot of coffee that day and I was peeing up a storm. So we decided that instead of leaving our stuff out on Friday and then when we were tired, that we would pack up all of our stuff Friday morning and put it in the van so that when we got back, Friday afternoon, we didn't have to go through all, tearing down the camp and all that stuff that we did. So this is really when the story starts, right? So that Friday we left, we walked out, we got to, I don't know, it was probably, I think I told you in the pre-interview, Vic, it was probably 2 or 2:30. We took a break. We saw this like little bluff and we walked up onto this bluff. There were some rocks up there. And so I sat down and it was a beautiful sight. There was like to our right, there was like a little valley. There was like from where we were, there was like a little slant of ground. Well, actually, I take that back. There was a little flat ground and then a little like slant going down into this like valley, grass valley. And then there was about 400 yards of fairly dense forest, not like what you think of when you think of forest, but there was a lot of trees. It's what I would call a forest. About 400 yards wide and maybe 500-600 yards long. And so as we were sitting up there, John and I were talking, and Mark was looking through his binoculars. So he's looking out over, and I'm trying to describe this so that you guys can understand what I'm saying. He was looking out over, we were high enough above the forest where we could see over the trees, right? And he was looking at this, like a plateau, maybe 600 yards away. And it was on the other side of this little valley of trees. And there was another embankment on the other side. And then like a flat plain. Almost looked like a mountaintop, but it wasn't a mountaintop, obviously. But there was a big boulder to the left, some small boulders out in the middle of it. And then farther, maybe 100 yards or a little more to the right, more forest, but much less dense. Hopefully you guys can visualize that. So Mark is looking through his binoculars, and all of a sudden he said, you got to remember too, I don't think I said this, but you got 3 guys here, all of us well over 6 feet, all of us well over 200 pounds. We got a really good plan, I thought. We're really, really well armed and well equipped. I thought that if there was anybody, 3 normal guys who could do this, it was us. But as we got into Friday, we kind of all had thought, this wasn't going to happen. This was a goose chase, but And John and I were talking to that effect, right? Like, I can't wait to get home. I was telling him I can't wait to get home and take a shower. And Mark all of a sudden goes, wow, that's a really big wolf. And I looked over at Mark and he goes, no, guys, seriously, that's a big wolf. So I got up, brushed my butt off, grabbed my binoculars that were on my neck, and I started looking through it. And then John he didn't have binoculars. He was looking through his rifle scope. And Mark goes, man, that is and then all of a sudden he went, oh, right? Because this creature had stood up. And I saw it when it stood up, right? And I was looking right at it when it stood up, and I started jumping up and down, literally. I mean, I was like a little boy. I was so giddy that we had actually found one of these creatures, right? It didn't last very long. So I'm telling John, I said, you see this? You see this? And he's like, yeah. I said, can you hit it? And he goes, oh yeah, I can hit it. And so we noticed, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. We noticed that this creature, he was using his hands and like either digging or he had some sort of a small creature by the rocks because he stood up and he was like bending over doing something with his hands. And I had made a mental note that when I got over there, I was going to investigate if he had something buried there or a little creature he had killed or what he was doing, but he kept sniffing it and he kept like moving rocks around and stuff. But anyway, I told John, I said, if you think you can hit it, and he's like, you want me to take the shot? And all of a sudden, Mark he was really gung-ho about this, right? Being a Marine and all. But as soon as he saw him, his entire demeanor changed. and he didn't seem like he wanted to be there at all, which turned out to be a real problem between us later on, but I'll get to that. So John looked at me and he's like, Brad, you want me to take the shot? And I said, headshot, for sure. And I said, can you hit him? He's like, oh, I can hit him. I said, okay, take the shot. So I'm watching through the binoculars, and I bring the binoculars down just for a split second, and I hear this. I mean, 416 Rigby is an incredibly loud round, and I didn't have earplugs in. I had this boom, right? And as I put up the binoculars too late, but John described to me what happened was he said that he hit it in the head. And this creature, who I believe, based on how big the rocks were, was 9 feet, or at least very close to 9 feet, and probably 700 pounds, if I had to guess. Huge creature, quite a bit bigger than the one I saw in my first encounter. So the creature, when it got hit, it spun. It was facing us when John took the shot. It spun to the right all the way around until it was looking away from us, and it was laying on the ground with its arm out, like somebody who sleeps on their side puts their arm out, when they're sleeping. And I looked at John. I put the binoculars up, and I saw that the creature was laying there. And I said, "Did you hit it?" He said, "Oh, I hit it. I hit it in the head, dead." I said, "You're sure?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure." So I'm looking at it. It's not moving. I was like, "Okay." So I tell Mark. I said, "Okay, Mark, take a deep breath. This is what we're going to do." I said, "I'm going to go to the left. I'm going to go through the forest. I'm going to come out on the other side, and I'm going to go along that big boulder up on that plateau. You go down to the right, past where all the trees are. Do not let," and I even warned him. So I said, "There may be more of them because these are pack animals." And I said, "Do not let us get flanked. The last thing we want is for one of these creatures to get behind us." Right? He's like, "Don't worry about it. I'm not going to let it get, we're not going to get flanked." Okay. So I said, "Go to the right and you go around all the way until you get even with him. When you're looking directly at it, I'll come up the left. And then if we have to finish it off up close, we will." And so then he says, "Man, and then I should have known when he said this, right? He's like, 'Are you sure you want to do this?' And I said, 'What?' And he goes, 'Are you sure you want to do this?' And I said, 'Look, if you want to go wait at the truck or whatever, that's fine.' He's like, no. But he goes, it's just because that's a really big creature." And I said, "Yeah, I know. That was why we came though, right?" And he's like, okay. And he went off to the right and I went off to the left. Now we had walkie-talkies, right? And I told him that we would stay in contact, but I said, as soon as I get fairly close, we'll turn them off. This is okay. So we were staying in contact with John, who was going to be watching us and covering us. He was staying in the same spot because he was leaned over on a boulder, right? He wasn't sitting down, but he was leaned over on a boulder so he could get a good shot. So I said, okay. So I started down the embankment, and it's like a grassy type embankment before you get into the valley where the forest is. And just as I was about to enter the forest part, I hear another boom. And I look back up, and John has fired again, and I put my hands up, in that universal sign that's like, "What are you doing? Like, what's going on?" Right? And he yells down at me. He said he was still moving. And so then I put my thumb up and I said, "Is he dead?" And he's like, "Yeah, the second round hit him in the top of the back on his backside." He's like, "Brad, there's no way. He's taken 2-4-16. He's dead." And I said, "Well, that's what you said." We're yelling this back and forth. And he's like, "He's dead. Trust me." I said, "Okay." So I start entering into the forest, right? And I am already aware that it's possible, just based on all of the stories that I've heard from other people who've encountered these creatures, that these are pack animals. So I'm being very quiet as I'm walking through. John's really not saying much. I told John, I said, "If you see anything, let me know." He said, "Okay." But he didn't say anything. So, all right, as I'm walking into the forest, I can hear Mike, he's walking while he's talking, and I can hear him. He's being really loud, way too loud. And I said, "You got to be more quiet." Okay. So now here's where it gets really interesting. So as I'm coming up to the end of the forest, when I say end, I mean probably within 15 or 20 feet of the little embankment, or not embankment, that's the wrong, the little I guess you would say embankment that you have to go up to get onto the plateau was probably 4 or 5 feet. I could see over it, but you have to go up this embankment to get to the plateau that wasn't grassed. It was just basically dirt and leaves and rocks up on this plateau where the Dogman was. So when I get to about 15 to 20 feet from the embankment, I'm still covered in the trees. I look up and my heart literally went down into my stomach, because as I was watching, I saw this creature who had taken a 416, well, we thought to the head. Here's where it gets interesting, Vic. John had missed a headshot. There was no headshot. He shot it, and I should have realized that the way he told me that the creature spun. He hit it in what would be our clavicle, just below his right shoulder, maybe 6 inches below his head and 6 inches to the right of his neck, which is what caused him to spin to the right and then fall away from us. Well, what I saw, though, when I put up my binoculars, and you got to remember now, I'm only about 120 yards from this creature. And I'm looking through the binoculars, and what do I see? This creature is struggling to get up. I mean, he's clearly wounded. There's blood everywhere. He's shaking. He's having trouble keeping his balance. Point is, with two 416 Rigby's in him, this creature is attempting to get up. Now, it was clear that he was extremely wounded, but the idea that he even survived that put the fear of God into me. So as I'm watching this, I'm like, oh boy. And I'm thinking at that time, I forgot to tell you, while I was walking through the forest, I was so overconfident because I was thinking about the people. I think I mentioned this to you in the pre-interview. I was so confident, and I was so like, yeah, you people telling me I can't do this. Well, guess what? I did it. Or this is what I was getting real cocky and overly confident, which I shouldn't have, but my personality. So I was on that high as I was coming up on this. I'm just trying to give you guys a picture of my mindset. But when I got to that 120 and I decided that I was going to look up and look at the creature before I made my final approach, because I had suspected he might not be dead and it was going to take a few more rounds to the head to finish him. But I at least figured there was no way he could move. No, I was wrong about that. So as he's like shaking and standing there, I'm watching from 120 feet and I'm saying to myself, my God, he survived that. And I mean, you want to talk about the fear of God. Here I see another dog or another wolf come up, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one. So now he was clearly bigger than all of these other dogmen. They were probably anywhere from 7 to 8 feet, I would say, just by looking at their height when they were on all fours. But now I'm starting to shake and realize, like, oh my God, they are in a pack, right? Which is the only real fear I had, is that we were going to run into, I really believe we could, if he would have been by himself, I believe we could have killed him without any question. But now we're looking at 5 of these creatures. So I froze when I saw that, right? And I brought up my walkie-talkie and I told Mark, I said, are you seeing this? And he said, I see it, man. He's like, there's no way. And I said, I know. Just slowly start backing away. Well, I told him we were going to turn off the walkie-talkie, but I forgot to turn mine off, which turned out to be a big mistake. So as I'm looking at these 4, and they were like sniffing him, they were acting just like dogs. I mean, these are pack animals. They're apex predators, but they're pack animals. And they were acting like it. They were sniffing him, and they weren't like, sometimes you hear stories about wolves tearing up a wounded one, right? They were like, it appeared to me anyway, that they were trying to see if he was okay. They're sniffing him, they're kind of like nudging him, rubbing one of the small ones was rubbing its head underneath the apex one that we had shot head. I don't know if it was to see if it was all right or what it was doing, but they were acting like a group of dogs or wolves when you see them. So I made the decision, like, one, okay, two, maybe, but five total, no way. So I had said I kept my binoculars up. In my head, I said, I'm just going to slowly back away and we're done. I was calling it a day right then and there. Just too many of them. So instead of getting my gun at the ready, I didn't want these dogmen to hear me because, by myself, if they would have come running at me, I would have been dead, literally. So I started backing up with my binoculars in my left hand and my right hand behind me, feeling trees so that it didn't make any noise, right? I was backing up, if you guys can visualize this. I was backing up with holding the binoculars in my left eye and then feeling for things as I was backing away so that I didn't bump into anything and make a noise, right? So I got to where I was probably 150, maybe 140 to 150 yards away from him. And then all of a sudden, you talk about fear, my walkie-talkie squelched and I realized I had forgotten to turn it off. And when that happened, I was watching one of the five. The one was heard, and then the four other ones that were kind of like meandering around the bigger one. It heard the squelch, and it took 4 or 5 steps directly in my direction and stuck its nose and started smelling. So I knew it heard it. So I immediately turned it off, right? And I kept backing up. It took like 3 or 4 more steps. And then it stood up and was like, it looked like to me like it was just smelling the air to see where I was at. So I said, okay, you know what? At this point, I had a choice to make. I could keep backing up and hope that they don't realize I'm there, or I could just turn and make a run for it. So I thought about it. I backed up a few more steps, and then I just turned and I started, running as best I could, which wasn't more than just a jog because of all the weight that I had on me. Plus I was making noises because of all the equipment that I had on me. So as I'm running, I'm trying to remember exactly how this went down. So I'm starting to run out of the forest, right? I'm probably halfway through it now, and I don't have the walkie-talkie on, so I'm not in communication with either John or Mark. So I'm just at this point beginning to jog, and I'm trying to get as fast as, go as fast as I can without making too much noise. So right as I get close to the end of the 400 yards or so of wooded area, I can hear on my right something. It's a ways behind me, but I can hear something to my far right coming towards me. And right as I got to the embankment, I turned my walkie-talkie back on, only to hear Mark screaming into the walkie-talkie, "There's one on me, there's one on me, there's one on me." And he's yelling, cussing, and making all kinds of noises. And then all of a sudden I hear gunshots, which was him. And so in the midst of this, I hear this big boom. And then I get hit in the face with some wood shreds or wood chips from a tree. And I realize that John has taken a shot. And at the split second, you're all caught up in the emotion. I thought he was taking a shot at me for some reason, trying to kill me. Then I realized he was trying to warn me because Mark was yelling on the walkie-talkie and cussing and saying all this other, he was panicking. And John couldn't communicate with me. So I hear this thwack after I hear the boom, this thwack, and then I get hit in the face and on the shoulder with some wood chips from the tree. And I look up, and about, he's probably 100 yards from me, up on where he was originally, right? Maybe not 100 yards. I take that back. Maybe 70 to 80 yards. And he's pointing at his eyes. You know how you do that thing where look, right? And he's saying that there's two. Like there's one coming right up on me and there's one to my right. Well, I knew about the one to my right, but I didn't know about the one that was coming right behind me, a little bit to my right. And so just as I turned, because I don't feel comfortable with rifles, even though I had a really nice rifle with me, I'm much more accurate and much more comfortable with a handgun. So instinctively, I put my Springfield, diagonal across my body so it would stay out of my way. And I pulled my Glock from the cross draw holster that I had on my chest. And just as I turned to my left, I see this creature, and he wasn't coming right at me. This is how intelligent these creatures are. Because, he probably, I think they know what guns are. I really do. And he wasn't coming right at me. He was trying to get behind me. He was on I'm standing at the top of an embankment. I just come out of the forest, and he had come up out of it. I had taken maybe 10 steps away from the embankment, and to my left, no more than 30 to 35 feet from me, to my left, I see him going through, and it wasn't foresty up there. There was a tree here, a tree there, but it wasn't forest, right? The ground was covered with loose rocks and dried leaves, maybe, I don't know, some other stuff, just stuff that you would normally see when you're out on the ground, right? Or when you're out in like a foresty area like that. And as he was going by, it was like a reflex. I saw him going by. He was maybe 10 feet in front of me and 35 feet to my left. And as he was going by, I could see that he wasn't coming directly at me. So I put 6 rounds from the 10 millimeter into him. I missed the first 3 because I was shooting for his head, which we'll talk about at the end, about the whole head thing and what I believe these creatures have some ability to avoid headshots because they know that will kill them, right? Anyway, I missed all 3 rounds, only 30 feet or 35 feet with my 10 millimeter, but I hit him in the last 3 shots on his back, like it would be like if you saw a dog on all 4s, not its chest and not its back, but that area in between. They're weak there. I know because when I hit him with the 3 rounds, he let out this dog-like whelp and slid. He kind of like, I told Vic about it, he like did a belly crawl almost, where he slid and then he started crawling away on his belly, but in the direction away from me. So I turned back, and just in time, and I'm starting to walk backward, but I decided that I was going to go full Rambo. So I pulled out my other 10 millimeter in my right hand, and I had 2 10 millimeters in my hand, and I'm walking backward with my guns out, right? And just as I did that, I hear another boom, and I look straight ahead, maybe 50 feet from me, because I was probably 55 to 60 feet away from the embankment that this creature had to come up. I see this creature just tumble. I didn't see the blood spray, but John had hit him, turned out later we found out, in the shoulder as well. And this creature kind of like, it's tumbled to the right and then was behind a rock. Almost like it was hiding. I think it got pushed there from the rifle round, but it was hiding behind the rock. And so I just kept backing up. And at this point, I'm only about, John has come down from the bluff and he's maybe 40, 50 yards behind me. And so we're still listening to Mark yelling. I hear more gunshots a couple hundred yards away, which later on I found out was Mark. Now, I should tell what happened to him. He got chased before I did and started running. He didn't even attempt to be quiet. He just made a break for it. And when he knew that the one that was following him was so close, he turned, got on one knee, and only 50 feet away, 50 feet, he tried to hit it in the head with 3 rounds and missed all 3 rounds that ended up hitting the creature in its chest. Even though he was only 50 feet away, and he had no explanation for that, just like I didn't. There's no way I should have missed those headshots. At only 35 feet, I'm good enough to where I should have hit all 3 of those shots. But I missed all of them. He missed all of them. John missed all of his headshot attempts. So Mark had fired through, he got down on one knee so he could he was shaking so bad he felt like he had to do that to make sure he could hit it in the head. It didn't. He hit him with 3 rounds in the chest. The creature kind of fell back a little bit, went to the right, looked like it was wounded pretty bad. And Mark just decided that at that point he was going to make a run for it. He stopped again, maybe another 100 yards or so from the van. We were getting close to the van at this point. And he fired again probably sounded like 5 or 6 more rounds. I don't know if he hit it. He never told me that he hit it again, but he must have fired because I heard more gunshot. So at this point, I'm walking backwards and John is covering me, but I know he's out of ammunition and he's going to have to reload because there's only 3+1 with a 416 Rigby. So I yell back at him. I said, run for the van, run for the van. And he just said, are you sure? Dude, are you sure? And I said, just run for the van, run for the van. And that's when I had that moment when I realized the situation that I had found myself in, that I purposely put myself in. And even though I was scared, absolutely crapless, and even though I was shaking to the point where I was having trouble keeping my gun straight, the adrenaline rush that I felt was unlike anything I've ever felt before. Just a complete, where you realize that you're completely relying on yourself and nobody else. And the reason that I told Don to get to the van was because this was my idea. And the last thing I wanted was for John to get hurt or attacked when this wasn't even really his, decision to come do this. He did it out of a favor to me. And that was my thinking, right? So I was out there at this point. When I told him to run, he did. He ran down this little embankment and shot straight for the van. And I'm only at this point, I'm only about 200 yards from the van, maybe 300. It's hard to tell, because it wasn't like a flat terrain. So the one creature that was directly in front of me apparently was more wounded than I realized because I didn't have any further interaction until at the very end. I'll get to that in a second. But he did not attack me anymore. He still was behind the rock. He had taken a 416 to the shoulder, though, so I'm assuming he was in an excruciating amount of pain. But the one that I had fired at that had done the belly crawl away, I could hear him coming back towards me. And my head is on a swivel at this point. I mean, I look like Rambo. I hate to say that because it sounds goofy, but I looked like Rambo because I had both guns in my hand, and I'm turning my head left and right because I do not want one of these creatures to get behind me because I know if he gets between me and the van, I'm in a lot of trouble. So I just keep walking backwards, not fast, but very definitely, right? Just as I get to where I'm about maybe 150 yards from the van, I see in my head spinning back and forth left to right, I can see something in the brush. There's some trees, but not a lot of trees where I'm looking at this moment, right? I see something behind one of the trees. It's a big black, and I knew it was him, right? And he was behind one of the trees and he was crouched down, right? And so when I got to where the embankment was, there's like another probably 5-foot embankment went down to where our campsite was because our van was only about 100 yards from where we were camping or had set up camp. And so when I got to where I was just about to go down that final embankment to make my 100-yard run to the van, I turned again to look and I noticed that he was, I don't want to say coming right at me, but he was moving in a direction where, and he's a huge animal, right? So I could see him in the brush and I just emptied my clip. I only had 9 rounds left and I put all 9 rounds. I don't think I hit him with all 9 rounds, but I heard him squelch again or do that little dog when they get hurt, that little sound dogs make. And so I know I hit him at least once, right? And as I turned and he kind of stopped and then he stopped approaching me and it looked like he was going back the opposite way. So I figured at this point, now's my chance, right? I looked over to the other to see if the other one was coming at me. It was still not in the picture. But just as I was turning, I stuck my Glock into my cross-draw holster, put the Springfield in my thigh rig, and put the Glock and was going to make a full-blown run for it. Well, I forgot that I had to go down the embankment. My ankle, I was wearing Under Armour combat boots, and my ankle, as I was turning, got caught, and I fell down the 5-foot embankment. I was so panicked because I realized that if they were watching this, they would have known that was their time to pounce, right? So I got up, pulled my Springfield again, just in case and one of them was coming. My ankle was absolutely swollen bad. Anyway, I tumbled down the embankment. Well, the worst part about that wasn't the fall, is that when I tumbled down the embankment, the Glock that was in my cross-draw holster came out and got buried in the dirt where the leaves, not completely buried, but was covered in dirt, right? I didn't realize I had dropped it. So now I'm walking backwards as fast as I can with the Springfield in my hand, and I'm just walking back as fast as I can. And right as I turned, I'd say maybe 40 feet from the van, I heard Mark and John say, come on, get in the van. So I just put the gun in my holster and I made a beeline for it. And Mark had the windows rolled up. John was standing at the passenger door of the van with the gun pointed directly at me, but I realized he was covering me, right? In other words, if one of these creatures would have tried to take me down from the back, John had reloaded the 416, so I felt like he was going to get it if one of them made an attempt, but they didn't. So I get all the way back to the van. At this point, I thought I was going to have a heart attack because I've already had a heart attack in my life. So I thought I was going to have a heart attack. My heart was racing so bad. I dive into the back of the van, and I'm barely in the van, and the doors aren't even closed, and Mark is burning out out of the dirt going the opposite way towards the dead end. And so I say to him, I said, you're going towards the dead end. He's like, I wasn't going to do a 3-point turn right here. Are you crazy? Which actually made sense when I looked back on it. So we go down to the dead end, we make our 3-point turn and come back the other way. Well, as we're driving back, my heart is beating so fast. I even said to Don, I said, you may have to call 911 now. I said, my heart's not stopping, right? The adrenaline was just overwhelming. Well, what sobered me up was, as I was sitting there, I looked down and I said, where's my Glock? And John looked back and he goes, well, you probably dropped it in the truck or in the van. And I said, no, it's not here, man. So we're going back and forth as he's driving back towards where we came from, right? So finally I convinced him. I said, dude, I can't leave a gun in the dirt. It's registered to me. If somebody finds that commits a crime, I'm in trouble. What if a kid finds that? You know, a lot of things are passing through my mind. So finally, him and I are yelling back and forth, and he appeared to me that he was on the verge of crying. I can't say that for sure because I didn't see tears, but he sure sounded like it. So finally, he's like, you got 1 minute. I'm going to stop across the road. He goes, if you're not back here in 1 minute, I'm leaving you. So I jump out of the van. I run back with my gun drawn, one of my 10mm drawn. I run back to where I'm pretty sure where it is because I remember that I had fallen, right? I run back and I'm looking around, and sure enough, it's under some leaves with dirt all over the grip. I stick it in my cross draw, and as I look up, no more than 40 feet from me is the animal that I shot because he had blood on his side and it was all dripping down his side. He's sitting there in that pose that dogs do when they're on their hind legs and their front paws are in front of them. And he looked like a dog. His tongue, I mean, a big dog, right? But his tongue was out. He was breathing heavy, but he was just watching me. And so I raised my gun, but he didn't make a move, right? So I just started backing away from him. I looked to the right, and 50 yards away, the animal that had taken the 416 to the shoulder that John shot is in the same pose 50 yards to my right. And it was almost like they were telling me, get out of here, right? Neither one of them made an attempt at me. My gun's going back and forth between the two as I'm walking backwards. So finally, when I got to where I was about 60, 70 yards away, I tucked my gun in, I just turned and I ran for the van, right? I jump into the van, and they could see these animals sitting there from where they were, right? They could see them sitting just on the tops of these embankments, like a 5-foot embankment all the way around where our campsite was. And the one was sitting to the right where I was standing, and one was sitting right in front of me. He was directly in front of me, no more than 40 feet. He could have easily attacked me. I mean, he would have got shot, but he could have easily attacked me. So that's the end of the Dogman encounter. But as we're driving away, I have to close the van door. As we're driving away, we were all just, I'm covered in dirt, sweat, we stink. We're driving away. We get no more than 1.5 miles, maybe 2 from where we had left, and we see this car going by, some sort of whatever they have in Oklahoma. I don't know if it's like in California, if it's highway patrol or state trooper. No siren, but the lights on top are flashing, and he zooms by us going like 70, 80 miles an hour. And so I said to Mark, I said, you think he's going there for us? And he's like, duh, well, what else? And I'm like, well, I mean, we didn't do anything illegal. And he's like, somebody heard all the gunshots, right? Because this didn't sound like, these obviously weren't hunter gunshots, just one shot, and then, that's it. This was, semi-automatic fire. And so we were quiet all the way home. We hardly said a word. My heart finally started, it took like an hour, but it slowly started going back to normal. When we got to our house, it took about 2.5 hours to get home, roughly. I wrote down in one of those journal books, like composition books. I have a bunch of them from when my daughter was in high school. And I wrote down the entire thing that I just repeated to you so I wouldn't forget any of the details, because I knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And I will say this, to a lot of you people who say that these creatures are spiritual or some sort of demons I've heard it all. I've heard, these are demons manifest in these bodies. These are spiritual creatures. These are men turning into werewolves. I mean, that is all absolutely ridiculous. These are apex predators, but they're pack animals. They act like animals. These are not, in my opinion, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of gruff for saying this, but it's very clear to me that these are blood and bone creatures. It's obvious that there's some sort of a hybrid. My feeling is, because, people have been seeing these things for thousands of years. Some people say they were created by our government, but that doesn't explain in the 12 and 1300s all of the sightings of these creatures. My personal belief is that these are the result of I'm a Bible believer, and when the angels fell and they did all these race mixing things and these chimeras that they created with their own genes and gene splicing, I believe they created these creatures, these half man, half wolf creatures. And that's the reason we have stories of them going back several thousands of years. That's the reason why we have pictures of them on the Egyptian hieroglyphs. All the stories in the 1200s in Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, because they've all labeled these as werewolves or whatever else you want to say. These dogmen are regular creatures in the sense that they're living, breathing cryptids, right? I mean, they can be killed. They do bleed. They have bones. They're not some spiritual entity that's going back and forth in dimension. That's ridiculous. These creatures act like dogs or wolves in the wild. And so, to me, this is just some sort of a hybrid creature that has managed to, with the help of government, helping cover up the story, as Vic would say. They cover this up because they don't want us to know how dangerous these creatures are. I think a lot of people go missing because of these creatures. I know that some of you are going to say, oh, no, these are spiritual creatures, and you're entitled to your opinion, but so am I. And I have faced these creatures now twice, one in a non-violent scenario, and the other, this one was in a very violent scenario. I went there with the intent to kill one of these things, and we came very, very close. I believe absolutely that had we run into the one by itself, we would have killed it. As to the description of these creatures, I didn't tell Vic this in our initial interview. The one creature that we wounded the worst, the first one that John shot, was, in my opinion, close to 9 feet tall. Since it was daylight, it was hard to see the color of their eyes. I would say, though, that they were probably yellow like the first one that I saw. They had some brown in them. All of them looked remarkably similar, almost like they were from the same family. They were all black with some brown, dark brown markings on them. They all had the short tail that they wag a lot. They all had the hands that look like old people's hands. They have ears that to me look like almost like cat ears. They're so pointy. The one that we originally saw was far more muscular than the other ones, which is why I think he was the alpha or the leader of the pack. I mean, like I said, he was close to 9 feet, and I would say 700 pounds, and that is a massive, massive animal. They looked in the face like there's a name of a dog. I think it's called the Belgian Marmonoid or Malmoid or something like that, but that's what these creatures look like in the face. I wouldn't go so far as similar to a German Shepherd, but not exactly. Their teeth are obviously much bigger, their heads are much bigger, but they didn't have, they had paws on their back feet, just like a dog, except much, much bigger, and then hands in the front, which when they go down on all fours, I noticed that their hand almost becomes like a paw. It's still the same. I'm not saying it like changes and manifests to something else. That's not what I'm saying, but it almost spreads out, and so it becomes that they can run on it very comfortably. It's hard to explain, but very, very difficult to kill. They can be killed, though. There is no question these animals can be killed. But as I was telling Vic, and this is going to sound a little hokey, but I believe these creatures have some sort of internal radar that keeps them from taking headshots. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but there is no explanation for all three of us missing headshots as close as we were. I just can't come up with any other logical explanation as to why. It's like we just seemed to barely miss their head every time we fired. And whether that's some sort of a supernatural power or a biological power that they have where they're able to move, or they know that a gun has been fired at them, and so they move their head because they know the only way that they're going to get killed quickly is from a headshot. So they're able to move it. I don't know, but I just know that there's no way we should have all missed headshots like we did. And Vic warned me not to do this, and I had planned on listening to him. I did. I never put any thought in it right after we did our first, because he and I had discussed in a private conversation. I told him what I wanted to do, and he's like, that's not a smart idea, right? Well, he was right. I probably shouldn't have done it, but I felt compelled with the two guys that I had that were with me. I felt like we were a pretty good team, and if any three normal guys could do it, I felt like we could, and we came pretty close. We really did. And I'll never do it again. I've had 2 encounters now, one violent, one non-violent. And I've learned that I'm too old, first of all, now to be going out dealing with these creatures. But I do believe that under the right circumstances, if somebody wanted to go kill these, like I mentioned in the first interview, you send 12 or 14 spec ops guys out there, they could easily kill one of these creatures. But, the government doesn't want us to know, so that's not going to happen. At least they're not going to tell us about it. So anyway, we got home, and to finish the story, when we got home, Mark just left, and I took a hot shower. John showered. We kind of crashed. We were tired. This was on Friday, so when we got up Saturday, we planned on leaving to come back to California Sunday morning, which would have been, we were planning on leaving August 31st to come home. So on August 30th, that Saturday, Mark came over, and we just we were having some beers, and I lost my temper a little bit because I didn't like the way Mark had handled himself, especially considering that he was a combat veteran. And it got kind of heated between us, and John had to get between us because I was saying looking back on it, I probably shouldn't have said those things, but he said some things too that, it was a ridiculous idea to start with, to which I said, then why did you agree to it? I didn't twist your arm to come out here. And then John got between us, and, we kind of mended fences right before I left, but not really. I mean, a little bit. I told him I was sorry. He said he was sorry, but I haven't spoken to Mark since. I've spoken to John many times, but I haven't spoken to Mark since. But since I'm going to be moving out to Oklahoma, I suspect I'm going to see him again. So it was a very harrowing experience, one that I wouldn't trade for anything, but I wouldn't do it again.
I really wish you would have taken my advice and not gone on that hunt, but considering the fact you didn't, I'm glad you still came back in one piece. Thank goodness for that. But having said that, Brad, I've got tons of questions to ask you, but unfortunately we're out of time. Would you be willing to come back next week for another show so I could do that?
Sure.
Great, we're looking forward to having you back. Thanks again so much. We'll catch you back here next week. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.